This year is on Ginas Vradim, Yoreh, Deah, klal, Alef, Siman, Gimel. It's a tshuva from Rabenu Avraham Halevi, who was a Rav in Mitzraim in the late 1600s, early 1700s. And it's a tshuva on al tolaim hanimtzaim bigvina, on worms or maggots that are found in cheese. There's a special Sardinian cheese that's well known, Casu Martzu, that they leave flies to put their eggs in the cheese, and the eggs hatch and the maggots eat at the cheese and make it very, very soft. It's a Sardinian delicacy. So it's going to be a discussion about worms and cheese. So he says, Kosher Beis Yosef betor Yoreh Deah Siman Pedalad. The Beis Yosef writes in Tor Yoreh Deah, Reish Daf Ein Zayin Mishim Hagos Sharidura, in the name of the Hagos Sharidura. Now, Hagos Sharidura from Rabenu Yitzchak Midura was a Talmud of the Maharam Mirottenberg. The Hagos on him are from students of them a little later. The Zelashon, and this is what he says. Rabim nahagu heter betolaim shel gvinos. Many have the custom to permit the maggots in the cheeses to eat them straight out. Afilu shekovtzin heina v'heina b'kaira, even if they are jumping around on the tray. Ad kan l'shono, end quote. And the reasoning in this, in permitting this, that even in this fashion is how they grow. Now, this is based on the idea that the place where insects grow, if they grow and are born within the fruits or within the objects where they come out, where they hatch, they are permissible until they come out on the earth and squirm on the earth, because that's what it says. Sheretz hashoretz al haaretz, as long as it hasn't come out to the air and squirmed upon the earth. There's a whole discussion, as we'll see, about that. But if we consider the cheese the place where these maggots grow, and not only that, but the way they grow is by jumping around, even on the tray. This is part of their home. So they haven't squirmed upon the earth yet. They haven't been shoretz al haaretz, and therefore they're still permissible. That's the assumption this tshuva, this Hagos Sharidura is based on. Okay, and we're not going to discuss that particular assumption here. We're going to just assume that assumption is correct. V'shamati omrim shebnei Ashkenaz Hashem yishmereim, and I've heard people say that the sons of Ashkenaz, the Ashkenazim, la'olam ochlim tolaim shebegvina bodan chaim, eat these maggots that are in the cheese while alive. They're not concerned with this at all. And at first glance, it seems that there's something to be concerned with here, as we're gonna discuss. And at first glance, it looks like the different sources prove that this is permissible. The B'tosefta de Trumos, Reish Perek Tes, Daf Samach Gimel Amud Beis, Tanya, we've learned, Ochel Adam Dagim V'chagavim, a person can eat fish and locusts, Bein Chayin, Bein Shchutin, Veinu Choshesh, whether they're alive or whether they're shechted, and doesn't have to worry. Ad kan, end quote. V'harambam Zal Beperek Alef Mihilchos Shchita, and the Rambam writes, Kasav Tosefta Zu, the Rambam writes down this Tosefta, and he doesn't add anything on it or change it. He writes it as is. implying that you can eat it alive. Implying that there's nothing forbidden in eating something alive. So too, it's implied in the Gemara in Elu Trefos, the Tanya that we learned. How do we know that we can that with a well or a pit or a cave, that if they have water, you can bend down and drink from them? You don't have to worry. Talmud Lomar tochlu mikol asher b'mayim chulu. From here, this is implied in the pasuk. This is what you can eat from all that is in the water, implying things that are in the water, even from all that's in the water, including these things. Which things? Mistama mashma. Simply, this implies the shochev v'shosem min hamayim, that you can bend down and drink from the water. Even though you're swallowing from the insects that are in the water while they're alive. Further, we say later in the Gemara, it says later in the Gemara, Boy Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef asked questions. Pirsha umeisa mahu. If it comes out of the fruit and it dies right away, what's the din? Miktsasa mahu. Let's say it only partially comes out. La'avir ha'olam mahu. If it just comes out to the air and hasn't been on the ground yet, teku. So these three cases, teku. So what are the three cases? Pirush Rashi Zal. Rashi explains. Pirsha mitocha pri la'aretz. Let's say it comes out of the fruit and goes onto the earth. Lo riksha, but it wasn't shoretz. It didn't move at all. It died right away. Shemei simiyad ben ifilas. It died as it fell. So it came onto the arts, but there's no shoretz all the arts. Mahu. What's the din? Mi amina the kivin shelo halcha lav shoretz al arts. Do we want to say that the fact that it didn't go, it didn't move, it's not considered moving upon the earth? Maybe you don't actually have to have it crawling. Shoretz. What does the word shoretz mean? Shoretz al arts. That is that it crawls or moves around. The second case, what if it partially comes out? Do we say that it's just like the whole thing coming out? Maybe we need the whole thing to come out. To the air in the world. Rashi says that, meaning to say that it came out of the fruit, shetaloi be'avir, that it's hanging in the air, and before it reached the earth, you grasped it in your mouth and swallowed it. Do you want to say that it separates out and it dies? It's permissible because it can't squirm on the ground. But something alive that could squirm, maybe not. Meaning to say that here you have the opposite of the first case. Here, it didn't hit the earth, but it was still alive. It could move. So you have and it's separated from the fruit, but it was in the air, so it didn't get the aretz, and is it enough to have rochesh without rochesh ala aretz? Just the movement, but not on the earth. That's the end of Rashi's explanation on that. Gemara. Okay. In Elu Trefos. Now, from this last question that Rav Yosef asks, it implies it implies that when it separates to the air and it's still alive, do I want to say that it's not considered movement and crawling because it didn't actually crawl upon the earth itself. That you prefaced and swallowed it with your mouth, and it's possible that there's nothing forbidden because of Shoretz al Haaretz. And now, if I want to say that when the creature is alive, it still has something forbidden, that you're not allowed to be disgusting. You're not allowed to make yourselves disgusting. My boy Rav lemifshat. What kind of question is Rav asking them? You can say that, you can answer, well, even though it's even without this forbidden thing of the crawling upon the earth, it still has something else forbidden, which is you should not be disgusting. So from all of these sources, it implies that there's nothing forbidden with eating something alive, because of it being alive. That is in the case where something that doesn't need shchita, like a fish or a locust or some of these insects. These insects that didn't go on the earth. However, from another sugya, now we're going to see the other side. It implies that there is something forbidden in eating something alive. And in Perek Rabbi Akiva, and this is something, this sugya that we're going to mention now, from Perek Rabbi Akiva, is we're going to refer to a number of times in this tshuva. Amasnisin the Rabbi Yehuda Omer, concerning the Mishnah that Rabbi Yehuda says, Af hamotzi chagav chai tamei kol shehu, that about the measurements of things that you're chayav if you take them out on Shabbos, because there's a certain measure. So if you take out on Shabbos a living locust, kol shehu, even the smallest amount, shematzino so lekatan lischok, that they set it aside for a child to play with it. Amru b'Gemara. So it says in the Gemara, Tana Kama Savar Lo. In the Tana Kama Savar, this is in a Rabbi Yehuda's statement at the end of the Mishnah. He doesn't include this case. So the Tana Kama seems to say, no, this is not so. That's not the measure for this. My time adilma ochile. Why? Because he might eat it. That is to say, that Tanna Kama holds that a living locust, you don't set it aside for a child to play with, because they might eat it. Ihachi tahor nami. So if that's the case, that Rabbi Yehuda says this is the measure by an impure locust. So what about a kosher locust, a tahor locust? That it says that the Mishnah does say the measure of kol shu. Rav Kahana. So, but we see that this is not the case. The Rav Kahana have a kaim kamei de Rav. That Rav, we have a story, and this is the story of Rav Kahana, that he was standing in front of Rav, and he was passing a locust in front of his mouth. He was, I guess, giving him a locust to eat, or at least he had it in front of him. So Rav said to him, Shakle, take this away from me. That I've eaten this, and I've transgressed Bal Tishakzu, that you shouldn't be disgusting. But rather, maybe it'll die and he'll eat it. Adkan. Meaning to say, maybe the child will for a chag of tohor, maybe it'll die and he'll eat it. Adkan. Pirush Rashi, Iachi tohor. If so, that it's pure. Chaynami dilma ochile. Maybe we'll say he'll also eat a living locust. Yimishum de inbu isur every minachai. The chag of inu ton shchita. And if you want to say that there's no concern here about every minachai, that even eating the limb of a living animal, because a locust doesn't need to be shechted, it's still, there's a problem of, don't be disgusting. Don't make your souls disgusting. That's brought down in Masechet Makos, like Rav Kahana, that there it brings a number of examples of things you shouldn't do to be disgusting, like holding in your pee-pee and drinking out of a karna du'umana, of a workman's vessel, or drinking things with poor pee in it mixed in. Shushi for the Rashi continues. A locust mean chag of Torah. The chushushifa is a kosher locust. And so the concern is not that we're worried he's going to eat it alive, but maybe it'll die, and it'll be for a tame locust, non-kosher locust. So that's why it's not included. About Torah Shopir Dami, but the Torah, which the Tanna Kama does mention, if it dies, that's fine. Adkan Lashon Rashi, that's the end of Rashi. Okay. Tosfos. Now we're going to bring a number of sources that agree with this and describe, talk about eating. What does it mean eating something alive? After Tosfos proves that a locust does not need to be shechted, they had a question from this previous Tosefta, the Tanya that we learned. Ochel adam chagavim bein chayin bein shruti. That a person can eat locusts whether they're alive or shechted. Because and they wrote, Afal gav the asr le'achol chai mishum bal tishaktu, that even though it's forbidden to eat something alive because you don't want to be disgusting, nonetheless it's permissible to cut a limb from it and to wash it off and eat it, and it's not a problem of the limb from a living animal. That's the end of the Tosfos. So they translate eating something alive as eating the Ever Min Chai. That as they established the permissibility that's in the Tosefta, that you can eat it alive, the Havi Le'inyan Ever Min Chai, that it's referring to Ever Min Chai, Sheyachtuch Mimenu Ever V'yochlu, that you cut off a limb and you eat it. And they did not want to describe things in their simplest sense. The mighty Bachilas Achagav Chai Kamos, who to eat it as it is, to eat the living locust, because it still has something forbidden that you can't be disgusting. And similarly, in the second chapter of Avodah Zarah, they wrote similarly that if you have, it says that a non-Jew who cooks something that you can usually eat alive, so uncooked, then it's not considered that the non-Jew, and then you eat it. It's not considered that you have transgressed eating something that a non-Jew cooked. So the case is, if a non-Jew lights a fire in a swamp and it kills the locusts there, it cooks them, so there's still a concern that you might eat it, implying that this is not something you would eat alive, and there's a concern that the non-Jew cooked it. That's the reference there from Avodah Zarah. That is, the Rashi and Tosfos are equal in what they say. The bechagav afal gav the leis be'isra erim achai. That a locust, even though it's not forbidden from a limb of a living animal, it's still forbidden because of not being disgusting, and you can't eat it alive. Rabenu Yitzchak or Zarua al ha'alachos shlehi perek elu treifos, and Rabenu Yitzchak or Zarua on the laws in elu treifos Kasav, and he says v'zel shona the chagav atar asur la'ochlo keshu chai chulu, that a living kosher locust, you can't eat it while it's alive. Like it says in Perek Rabbi Akiva, so the Zorah as well. So to the Rashba brings this story of Rav Kahana that he would have transgressed because it's alive. Hagos Mordechai the Masechet Chulin, and the Hagos Mordechai, who's not the Mordechai, but another student. Siman Tavshim and Gimel Azli B'Shitas HaTosfos B'Yishuv Tosef Tazu. He also goes in accordance with the opinion of the Tosfos in answering this Tosefta. Shekasvu v'Zelashonam, that they write, and this is what they say: B'Shali Perek Pirshu Tosfos B'Shali Perek Rabbi Akiva. That the Tosfos writes in Perek Rabbi Akiva, the Chagav Tar Asur L'Achlom Chai Mishum Bal Teshakzu, that a living locust you cannot eat because of Bal Teshakzu. Nonetheless, you can still cut off a limb and eat it as medicine. It's not considered eating the limb of a living animal. And Tosfos went at length about this. End quote of the Gos Mordechai. Or the Zerua, he brings all these down. Gam Hagos Maimonios, Sagi B'Hachsuya. The Hagos Maimonios also mentions this. Perek Alef, Milchos Shchita Kosvu Al Divrei Rambam. That they read on the words of the Rambam, She'eti Lochlan Chaim, that says that it's permissible to eat them alive. V'zelashon, and this is what he says. Kain Isa b'Tosefta Reish Perek Testet Trumos. This is what it says in Tosefta in Trumos v'Yaviu Rabenu Shimshon, and Rabenu Shimshon from the Balei, the Rash from the Balei Tosfos says Ochel Chagavim Ben Chaim Ben Shchutim, that it says where it says you can eat locusts whether they're alive or shechted. V'Ochel Lav Davka, and to eat them not necessarily the Ha'ika Bal Teshakzu, because there's still it would still transgress. You can't be disgusting. So Perek Rabbi Akiva. Rather, what does it mean to eat them alive? That there's no transgression of eating the limb of a living animal, because they don't need to be shachted, and that's what it's referring to, bein chaim, bein shchutim. The Lashon Hagos Tzarek Tzastikon, you need to fix this language of the Hagos a little bit. But his intention is im chatach mehem Eiger, because he doesn't mention cutting off a limb. That's his intention. If you cut off a limb, va'achlo, and ate it, ein bo isra Eiger minachai, that it's not considered Eiger minachai, ve'in kan beis michush klal, you don't have to worry about it at all. Va'afal gav sheyesh lefarish divrei Hagos, that the way it's written, you could explain the Hagos Maimonios, shim achol kol achagav shalem, that if you eat the whole locust complete, that would be permissible in terms of Eiger minachai, even though they would still be Baal Shaktu. Nonetheless, that's not correct. The Lishna that Rambam Shalov Bo Divrei Hagos, because in the words of the Rambam that the Hagos is referring to, the Asya Lahatir B'Shufi Shein B'Davar Tzad Isur Klal, because the Rambam seems to imply that he wants to completely permit this thing, and there's nothing forbidden there at all, and not about the Shaktu. V'al kol panim divrei harambam tzrichnis farish ukimta demukmi tosfos b'tosafta. And therefore, at any rate, the words of the Rambam need to be explained as it's established, that the way the Tosfos reads the Tosafta. Gama Prisha Kasav Kain. The Prisha also writes like this: Lahedja Metor Yoreh Deah Siman Gimel. Zelashona. This is what the Prisha says. Pafal Gav the in Dagim to Unim Shchita. That even though fish do not need to be shechted, Umuter Lachtoch Mimenu Every Minachai, and you're allowed to cut off a piece and eat it alive, and to eat it or to eat them as when they're dead. Nonetheless, you can't eat them alive as is, because it's disgusting. The Beis Yosef writes, look, Rabenu Sadia, and this is not like Rabenu Sadia Gaon, the Omar Mesi Masurim, who says that those that are dead are forbidden. And we were forced to change the nusach, the Girsa of Rabenu Sadia, who says that he says that the dead are forbidden, and to say that it's those that are alive that are forbidden, even though that's how the Beis Yosef quotes him. The Mitzraim Beis Yosef Besof Dvarav is Elashona, that the Beis Yosef ends his words and he says V'li Nira. And it seems to me that Rabenu Sadia Nami Lav Mishum Ever Minachai also Lahu, that Rabenu Sadia is not referring to that it's forbidden because of Ever Minachai, Ela Mishum Bal Tishaktu, but because of Bal Tishaktu. To the Muchach Perek Rabbi Akiva, like it says in Perek Rabbi Akiva, Im Ken Muchach de Kayachaim. If so, Rabenu Sadia must have been referring to when they're alive. If you have to say, he's not referring to Ever Minachai. Sefer Prisha, that's the end of the priest of the Sefer Prisha, who says all of that. Now, this comment that the Prisha makes on the Beis Yosef, it's correct. We find that the Kesef Mishnah has a different way of explaining the Rambam. And that the Rabenu Sadia correctly says that the dead are forbidden. And his intent is Lomar, that he says that you have to gather the fish while they're still alive. And if they already died in the water, it's no good. And afterwards he brings a support from the Tosefta, that we don't worry about gathering them alive, because it says clearly in the Tosefta, that you eat, a person can eat them whether alive or shechted, and you don't have to worry. That the Tosefta holds that whether you take them while they're alive or whether you take them while they're dead, then you can still eat them. That seems to be implied by the Tosefta. The Tosefta is not talking about eating them, but rather gathering them. Nonetheless, on what we're trying to refer to, this that it says there that you can eat them alive, it's referring only to a limb. That's referring that it's not forbidden because of a limb of a living animal. The Bais Chadash also, the Bach also brings this Tosfos and goes according to their opinion. Asher al Kain. And therefore, then since we've gathered a whole bunch of early rabbis, and they all pushed and made the effort to explain this Tosefta, so that I won't argue on that story of Rav Kahana. So it's established halach of yasid hi shelo and it's set in the ground and to not falter. That this is how it is. If so, that's also how we are going to establish ourselves. That, and we'll establish this sugya that it implies where it says that it's not forbidden to eat something alive. It doesn't actually mean to eat them as is alive. A Tosfos of Divrei Rambam, Far Pirshu Marishonim. Now the Tosfos and the Rambam, the Rishonim already explained. That they're referring to permit the limb of a living animal in this. And the Tosefta itself, we could actually answer that it's like the Kesef Mishnah says it. That where this that it says what you can eat them whether they're alive or dead, the main chiddush is to say that even when they're dead. Like we said, not like Rabenu Sajid, and then there's to say that even though they died on their own, while they were still in the water, they're still kosher. And don't say you have to gather the fish while they're still alive, because when you gather them while they're alive, that's the shechting, and therefore you have to gather them while they're alive, and that's how you shecht them. Therefore, to contradict this, the Tana says the afal gav, the matzon mesim b'mayim shoro de b'chiyah gav nanami mikri yasifa. Even though you find them dead in the water, it's permissible that in this way, it's also called gathering them. Uliyashiv hahiboya bas raisa de Rav Yosef. And in order to answer that last question of Rav Yosef, the mashma minah shim kolta mina avar chayil l'soch piv d'shaya, that there it implies that if you swallow it while it's falling in the air before it hits the ground, it's permissible. Ikal memar, we can say the ikar boyas Rav Yosef is bichi agav nalasad lav the sheretz hasharetz alaretz. We could say that Rav Yosef is only referring to that one particular lav of crawling on the ground. But I'll still tell you, even though if it's permissible for this reason, we can still say that it's forbidden because it's disgusting. Rabbi Yosef wasn't referring to whether or not it was forbidden for a different reason. And therefore, that brisa that it says that you can bend down and drink from the water, that are in the wells and so forth, even though it has insects, you can say that it's referring to insects that are already dead. Or you could say that the Tana doesn't go all the way down to all the different Isurim. He's only referring to Sheretz al Aretz and not Bal Tishakzu, and therefore it would still be forbidden, but not because of Sheretz al Aretz, perhaps. Hinami Yishlomar Shatu Septa Rav Yosef Abrayis L'Naxi Rak L'Inyan Chiyuv Malkus. Or you could say that the Tosefta and Rav Yosef and the Brisa, what they're concentrating on, the reason that they're not mentioning Baal Tishakzu is because they only want to refer to things that you get lashes on, things that are forbidden from the Torah. However, this forbidden thing of Baal Tishaktu inu ela isura d'Rabbanan, it's only forbidden from the rabbis. But Alma alone, therefore they didn't worry about mentioning it. And like we're going to prove later, that this Isser is only from the rabbis. And so we've tried to find a number of ways to push out this sugya of Rabbi Akiva from halacha that would forbid eating something alive, and we haven't been able to. Exactly the opposite. We found a number of reasons why it's a strong halacha. First, that the Gemara simply asks to the Tanakama from it, implying that this story is already halacha. Further, this law we learn from a story, and we have a rule that Ma'aser Rav, the story is strong, a stronger proof. If you have not just a din, but a story that happened, an actual Ma'aser, it's not just intellectual, but something that happened. The Baal Meim Razuhu Rav, and further, that the one who said this was Rav. And Rav is a strong source. Even when Shmuel argues on him, we still hold like Rav. How much more so when he doesn't argue on him? Even though we do find when Rav argues on a Mishnah, we don't hold like Rav in any suri. And this is his suri. But nobody's arguing on him here. And further, it's implied that Rav's not only saying his own opinion, but an opinion that's already agreed by all the sages. The Kamar that he says, Shakle, take it away. That the people shouldn't say that I ate it. And I've transgressed Baal Tishaktu. Meaning to say, all these other people are already going to assume that this is the halacha, that you can't eat it because of Baal Tishaktu. And you say it's not his own opinion that he's worried about. He's worried about other people that already have this opinion. Implying that this is something that's agreed by the sages. That something alive has this forbiddance of Baal Tishaktu. And I saw in the Marikash, in his Hagos in Yoreh, Hagos Erech Lechem of Rav Yaakov Castro, also a Rav in Mitzraim before the Ginas Vradim. His Hagos are like the Ramah on Shulchan Aruch, but for Sephardim. V'hine Rov Hagos of Zal hem lekuchim Sefer Bes Yosef. Now most of the Hagos of the Marikash are taken from Beis Yosef. And I am hearing and I'm not understanding. Where did he find Beis Yosef or a different place? Someone who permits to eat them alive. Maybe it's what the Beis Yosef brings in the name of the Rambam that brought the Marikash to say this. The Rav Yosef says in the name of the Rambam that it's permissible to eat them alive. And the Marikash holds that this is a complete permissibility, that you can eat them alive as is. and after asking forgiveness from his holy bones, lo dak b'divrei Rav Beis Yosef, if that's the case, he didn't scrutinize the words of the Beis Yosef. Shikavanas divrei Rav Beis Yosef hi kemo shebiara yafe b'sefer prisha, that the intention of the Beis Yosef is like it says in the book Prisha, the Harambam also lahatir behem every minachai, that the Rambam here is coming to only permit every minachai, not the whole living thing. But Rabenu Sadya the aselo poligale, and Rabenu Sadya that forbids it, he's not arguing on him le'inyan isra every minachai, referring to every minachai. But rather, Rabenu Sadya is saying that it's forbidden because of Balti Shaktsu. Even that, if so, both the Rambam and Rabenu Sadya hold together. And both of them hold that it's forbidden because of Balti Shaktsu, to a greater or lesser degree. And both of them permit it because of the limb of a living animal. And we don't want to say that this is only forbidden if you swallow it alive. But if you cut it into pieces, that it's already died before you swallow it, then there's nothing forbidden. The im isa lahachiluka lama hayachush shravazeh. Meaning to say, okay, fine, put it in your mouth alive, but once you start chewing it, you're going to cut it into pieces, and then it would be Eiger minachai, and there's no problem of Eiger minachai, so you're good. If so, why in the story of Rav Kahana and Rav, why was Rav concerned? If he could actually chew it, and that would be fine, he would have cut it up and there's no Eiger minachai, and there's no Baal Shaktu. Why didn't he do that? Why did he think that people would think he didn't do this trick of getting out of this Isser by chewing it, cutting it into pieces? Why wouldn't he do this thing? To cut it up in his mouth before eating it. And if this is so, the Talmud should have answered this. And you could even answer even further. You're worried about a child eating it. The child's not going to swallow it whole. And the child, it's too big for the child to swallow whole. They're going to cut it up. If they cut because their throat is small, they're going to chew it. And this answer would be very nice, that we could answer the Mishnah in its simplest sense, that when it says it's alive, it's alive. And why does the Tanakama say something even further that's more difficult? That first we wait until it dies, and then eat it. That when it says it's alive, it doesn't actually mean alive. Okay, in Raya yesh leze mahad because of Rambam perikei milchus mechalas asuras alachadal v'zel journal. And almost a proof for this, we find in the Rambam that he says, Lokach kazais min ha'ever kebriyaso basar gidin v'yatzamos. If you take a complete limb as it's created, with the meat and the sinews and the bones, even though you've taken apart these different pieces of it before you swallow it, you're still chayiv. Meaning to say, in this case, you're only chayiv if you eat all these three, if you eat something complete with these three components. And he says, well, you separated them in your mouth before you swallowed, nonetheless you're chayiv. And this is a statement of Rabbi Yochanan. The time of Rabbi Yochanan, and the reasoning of Rabbi Yochanan is because your throat enjoyed this whole kazayit of it, because you placed it in your mouth. There's a placement of the mouth of this object all at once. That is to say, placing it in the mouth is what causes this stringency on the food, that it retains its forbidden status. How much more so in our case, that somebody has something disgusting in their mouth, that's when they care about it. They don't care about it as much once it's already gone down to their throat and they swallowed it. And this is what we find if you have to give a sick person something disgusting as a medicine, like locusts and the like. And I looked it up and I found that there were indeed cases of people using locusts as, lice, not locusts, lice as medicine. 9 head lice. Exactly. You eat 9 head lice and it helps cure jaundice or something. Anyways, but the way people do this is that they wrap it in something else. To separate a little bit when they place it in the mouth. Even though afterwards they're going to touch the thing itself as they swallow it. So the hanachas hapeh is the problem. And I've seen that we should bring here that implies the opposite of what we just wrote. That it says there, Amar Rabba bar Rav Huna. Rabba bar Rav Huna says, Risek tisha nemalim. If you crush 9 ants, and you bring 1 ant, and you complete it to make it a whole kazayas, you get 6 lashes. 5 because you ate this creation, this particular kind of insect. 1 because you ate a kazayas nevela. That one last ant completes to a kazayas. So what do you mean you're eating a nevela? Pirush Rashi, mishum kazayas nevela. How did you get to nevela from the last ant? Nevela means a carcass, something dead. Rashi says who mace, that when you swallow this live ant, it dies. And then you add it on to the kazayas nevela. Ad kan lashon. That's the end of the quote from Rashi. Rashi explains it this way because it's hard for him. How would this become a nevela of kazayas if it's not dead? Eating something alive is not considered nevela. And therefore he says, when you swallow it, it's already dead. Now his opinion is this is not correct. The Eiger milsa azla basar hanachas peh, because like we mentioned, the main thing actually is not when you swallow it, but when you place it in the mouth. So you place the living the living ant in your mouth, that's when we establish whether or not it's forbidden or permissible. Just like the kazayas of every minachai could the like we said before, in the name of the Rambam. Now, Rabbi Kiva Eiger comments on this. Look in Haggah number 5. Near Bezeh, Rashi, with asking forgiveness to say such a thing on Rashi. Especially because there's no his svar is not correct. There's no concern. The shiny be'aver that he says by Aver Minachai, that it's established when you place it in your mouth. That the forbidden thing, when it's separated from that which is alive, only you divide it in your mouth. We say that since it's divided up in your mouth in a way of eating it, so the importance of that limb doesn't go away just by swallowing it or chewing it. But if that's Ev Minachai, but in terms of Nevela, it has a different status. It's certainly simple that we go about, we look at what's it like when you swallow it. What do we care if when you place it in your mouth, it wasn't Nevela? In the end, you swallowed Nevela. Nonetheless, it's difficult for me, the case of somebody who swallows a kosher bird while it's alive, that's forbidden even the smallest amount. Because of Rashi, Rashi writes that this is because of the limb of a living animal. And so once you swallow it, it would be like the ant, and it dies, and there's no Eiver Minachai. Perhaps we can say that we can say that an ant is small in its life, and when you swallow it, it dies. But a bird is not so small in its life, and it doesn't die necessarily when you swallow it. Akiva, that's the end of the Haggah from Rabbi Kiva Eiger. And indeed, one of the dangers of this cheese that's under discussion, the Casu Martzu, is that when you swallow these maggots, they sometimes survive the eating, and they try to get out of your stomach, and it causes tremendous pain and nausea and other bad things. So it's not a guarantee that things are going to die just because you swallow them, even though that's the Rashi's svar by the ant. The Eiger milsa ozlo basar nachas peh. So back inside, now we see the Tosfos actually gives a different explanation than Rashi here. And they found a different reason. This is what they say. That you crush 9 ants, but one is alive. Meaning to say, it's not that it's alive, but it's complete, a whole ant. But certainly it's dead. But if it's actually alive, you can't add it on to a nevela. Nevela means dead. That's the end of their quote. So we established there, according to the Tosfos, that we go in things that are forbidden when you place it in your mouth. And as soon as you put this forbidden thing in your mouth, that's forbidden. It's forbidden even if you're going to cut it up afterwards. However, the Rambam has a different way of looking at this. The Rashi v'Tosfos kol echad mehem dochik kumi hoch milsa sheyeh kanes v'nevel. The Rashi and the Tosfos, each one of them are pushing to establish that there should be here the Isra Nevela, and that's what they're concerned with. However, the Rambam doesn't seem to need any of this. So we learn this from the Rambam, where he says that he says that if you eat a living bird, in terms of Eiger Minachai, even the smallest amount, the smallest one, the Rashi says, oh, it's because it's Eiger Minachai, it's alive. But the Rambam says, no, that's not what it's talking about here. When it's talking about swallowing a living bird, the Isra here is Nevela. And therefore, the Rambam holds you can swallow something alive and it can still be considered Nevela. And that's what he's relying on in the sugya of crushing 9 ants, but one is alive, that you can get lashes because of Nevela. That he holds that in something alive you can still say that there's Nevela, even though you can't shecht it because it's something tummy. And with this we can answer what the Maggid Mishnah says, that things that are non-kosher don't have nevela. And then, in that case of 9 ants that are crushed, he says there's something in the nevela here. And then now with what we described, it makes sense that we can make a distinction. If it's still alive, you can still have nevela even if they're tamei, even if they're not kosher. It's only after they're dead there's no isur nevela. But while they're still alive, there can be nevela. But we can still scrutinize. Kivan shepasak de betzibur chaya yesh ba mishum nevela, that since he paskined that a kosher bird has nevela, afal gav leis ba kazais, even if it doesn't have a kazais. Lama kasav li'il b'din risik tishon amalim lahatzrich shir kazais. Why do the 9 ants need to have a shir kazais to be considered nevela? Once you eat 1 ant alive, you could say it's already nevela. It's alive. And just for this 1 ant, you could already get 6 lashes. One, 5 because of you ate an ant, and 1 because of nevela. And we can push and try to answer the betzipor. That by a bird, kivin shebemina gedelim vasidin liyos be'em shir kazais. That by a bird, the birds grow. And there are other birds, or this one itself might grow to become a whole shir kazayas. Therefore, we can obligate you now, even though it doesn't have a whole kazayis yet. But with an ant, I'll tell you, there's no such ant that's really going to be a whole kazayis. This is what Tosfos writes in Elohin Elokin Shlihid Daf Yudvav, the Bechad Nemala L'Shchiach Dika Kazayis. That you're not going to find, it's not findable to have an ant that's a whole kazayis. Kishochel Nemala Chaya Yeshba Isra Nevela. And when you eat a living ant that has nevela to it, Pachal Ud Kama Nemeli Mirusak, and then you eat a number of other ants that are crushed. That's when it adds together to become nevela. That since this one ant, we can say that it has nevela to it. Therefore, the other 9 ants get added to that. The chayva mishum nevela, that you're obligated because of nevela, and you can add on the kazayis. So you need both together. You need to have a kazayis, and you need to have nevela. Non-kosher ants, according to the Rambam, wouldn't be on their own. Even a kazayis wouldn't be, you wouldn't transgress. But one ant you would. But one ant is not enough, because there's no such one ant as a kazayis. Therefore, you have to have the one ant together with the other 9. And once we're cooking here, in this idea, we find that there's nothing forbidden from the Torah here at all. Because the main point of the pasuk, that you should not be disgusting, is only coming to talk about insects. Whether it's talking about the insects of the that fly, insects of the water, or insects on the earth. And the Rambam already went at length about this in the counting of the mitzvos. And in the end of his words, he writes, and this is what he says: so it's all the sages also said, that someone who holds in they're having to go to the bathroom, they transgress Bal Tishaktu. And somebody who drinks water in a workman's vessel through hekesh, and the same thing would be that eating yucky things, and drinking yucky things, the person pushes them away, that we're warned against doing this. But you're not chayiv malchus here, because the pasuk itself is not referring to these extra things, but only to insects. But they can still be hit for rebellion. That's the end of the quote of the Rambam. In the laws of forbidden foods, he writes, our sages forbade food and drink that the soul of most people rebel against. Like food and drink that's mixed together with barf or poo, disgusting liquids, and the like. So too our sages forbade to eat in gross vessels, that a person's soul mourns from. If you go in kli beis hakisei, like vessels from the bathroom, or the glass vessels of the barbers, adam, that they scrape away the blood with. And the like, and the Rambam goes length there. I kind of shown it. And I went at length to quote what he says, because I heard people say that if you want to say the Rambam holds that eating something alive, you transgress Baal Teshaksu, he wouldn't have been quiet about it. And he would have mentioned it because it's clearly mentioned in the Gemara. So since the Rambam explained how he describes this Isser of Baal Teshaksu, it's all included within his words. He doesn't mention eating something alive. Why? Because the Rambam's not a salesman who's going to give you all the different cases, all his different wares. And since this whole Shmuah about Rav not eating a live locust is not written in the place where it discusses it, he didn't bother mentioning it within context. That since he's already established, it's already understood that the reason you don't eat something alive is because it's disgusting. You don't have to mention it anymore, because he made the distinction between what the pasuk is talking about and the reason all these other things are forbidden because of Baal Teshaksu. Rashi, and Rashi, we quoted his language before. That when you eat something alive, it does have this transgression. Because of the Rashi also mentions that this is like it's mentioned in Masechet Makos from Avkahana. And on all the cases that are brought in Makos, it doesn't mention this case of eating something alive. He says that the reason that this is forbidden is just like those forbidden things in Masechet Makos, that the reason is because it's gross and the morning of the mind. Could go in Mishai and Kavav, like holding back you're going to the bathroom, Vishasi Bekarna Duamana, or drinking from a workman's vessel, Devade Mifshat Pshitalach Bahanhu, that it's certainly simple in these, Shein Behem Rak Mitzvahs Prishim B'Derabana Ba'alma, that all of these are only from the sages that they said to stay away from this stuff. Shari'in B'Kasu Shum Zeich because the pasuk itself doesn't mention this at all, only about the insects, for Adin Khan, and that's the same thing here. Even though it's referring to a living locust, and it's under the category of a flying insect. Don't say that eating it while it's alive, because it's alive, it's forbidden from the Torah itself. Because, well, the Torah says Baal Teshaksu is referring to insects, and here you're eating a live insect, even though it's a permissible insect, but because this is an insect, you can include it there. That's not so. If so, there's no distinction. It doesn't matter what kind of insect it is, a flying insect, a water insect, or a land insect. That there's they themselves from the Torah are not forbidden. It's not forbidden to eat it alive. That this pasuk of don't be disgusting is not referring to when they're alive, but rather in general to eating insects, in whatever kind of insect it is. That's what it's referring to, and not referring to eating disgusting things, which is the Rabbanan, the Rabbanan. ומצאתי לרב בית יוסף בתור יורדיה סימן קוף י"ו דף ק"ח עמוד בייס שנסתפק בזה, and I found for the Beis Yosef who has doubts about this Shikasav that he writes the Efsher the Hanach Mili de Oraisa Nami Asiri, that he writes that it's possible that these things that are mentioned are also forbidden from the Torah. It's only that the rabbis established that you don't get malchus for it. Like we find by a half measure, she's surah min Torah, that if you do a half measure of an isser, it's established that we say that that's also min Torah, even if you didn't do the full measure. Half measure you did. It's only that you don't get malchus for it, you don't get lashes, but it's forbidden. Ad kan l'shon, this end of the quote. Lanias daiti ein kan tavlin. And in my opinion, this that the Beis Yosef thinks that it might be Isser D'Oraisa, there's no seasoning here. Where are you going to learn this from to say that it's forbidden from the Torah? The Rambam already explained this pasuk in Sefer HaMitzvos, that the simple meaning of the verse is only referring to insects, and when at length there, when you quoted him. Now this verse, Baal Tishaktu, is mentioned twice in the Torah. Suf Parshas Shmini, Amar HaKasuv. In the end of Parshas Shmini, the Torah says, Lo Tishaktu Snafsho Sichem B'chol Asheretz HaSharetz Al Aretz V'lo Titamu Bahem V'nitmeisem Bam. Do not be disgusting in your souls with all that crawl upon the earth, and do not become impure with them, and you'll become impure. This pasuk doesn't mention anything other than insects at all. So Parshas Kedoshim. And the second time it's mentioned in Parshas Kedoshim, Amar HaKasuv, the Torah says, Lo tishaktu nafsho seichem ba'behima u'ba'of u'b'chol asher tirmos ha'adama. Don't make your souls disgusting with the animals and the birds and anything that crawls on the earth. She'ivdalti lachem l'tamei, that I separated from you to become tamei. And in this pasuk it adds also in this isser an impure animal, cattle, and impure birds. And so all those other examples that our sages said, they're not even hinted to. We must say that it's not a complete drasha from these psukim. It's only a smachta. It's only we lean on these verses to learn out that other things that are disgusting we should stay away from. Gama shekos v'rav Beis Yosef the kaimlu l'Rabbanon the havu kechatzi shir sh'asur min Torah. Also, what the Beis Yosef says, that it's like chatzi shir, it's forbidden from the Torah. It's only that we don't get lashes. This also doesn't make sense to compare it to this just from our own hearts without a proof. That by a half a measure we say that it's forbidden because there's a great reason for it to be so. This is brought in the Gemara that says the Gabi Isur Chelev Amar Kra, where you're not allowed to eat fats. The pasuk says, "Kol Chelev Shor Vakesav Ve'ez Lo Sochelu." All fats of oxen and sheep and goats you should not eat. Shekasav Gabi Chelev Kol, that it says all fats. It says by the fats, uses the word all, modifying the fats. Meaning they say all kinds of fats, even a small amount of it. That's not a full measure. It's still forbidden. However, concerning the punishment, there it writes, Kol ochel chelev min habehema chalua. Anyone who eats fats from the animal. The high call lav achelev koi ela ochel. That this, where it says all, by the punishment, it says all who eat. It's referring to the people who eat, not the fats. If so, we're not adding on to any other case for the fats. Because it could have said, because anyone who eats any kind of fat from the animals. It doesn't say that. Therefore, it's just established. It stays as the din should be. That you only get punished for it on the measure of eating, which is a kazayis. And in our case, there's no hint to this at all. Eating something alive, or all these other examples that Chazal gave, there's no hint to saying or making a distinction between the punishment and the isser. Not even a little bit. And since we can't make the distinction, if they were forbidden from the Torah, then they would also be, you'd also get lashes. And aside from this, we find a clear proof that eating something alive is not forbidden from the Torah. Mina duadinami l'shar mili the b'mesechet maggots. And from it, we can say that this applies to these other cases in Mesechet Maggots, these other examples of Balta Shaktu. Amarav ochal tzipor tehora b'chaya b'choshu b'misasa b'kazayis. It says in Perek Nasha, Rav says, if you eat a kosher bird while it's alive, it's even the smallest amount. While it's dead, you have to eat a kazayis. Okay, and we've already mentioned this case before. Machlokas should be in Rashi v'Rambam b'pirusha, and the machlokas between Rashi and Rambam in what it means. But we're not getting into that machlokas here at all now. But rather we want to point out who's the one who said this. It's Rav. And he's the same guy that whole story with Rav Kahana and the locust happened to, the Beshili Perek Rabbi Akiva. And from here we can learn that eating something alive, because it's alive, it's not forbidden from the Torah. Because Rav was saying there that if you eat a living bird, you're chayav. He should have said there, you're chayav twice. The Alef law am alti shaktu. V'hashneini mishum isur nevela libed Rambam u'mishum efer min achai libed Rashi. That that Rav already this already has been established why you get lashes for eating it alive. I'm sorry. Why you're chayiv once for eating it alive? We already established, according to the Rambam, eating it alive is because there's nevela, and according to the Rashi, it's because of every minachai. And he doesn't say that there's anything wrong with eating it alive because it's alive. Of Balta Shaktu. Midisasim lastumi. And since he just says it straight like that, you're chayav once. Mash meshapish in kan rak isur echad ve'in sheni. Implies that there's only one forbidden thing here, not a second. And if so, it's only forbidden from the rabbis. And since we've established it's only from the rabbis. You still shouldn't push away this forbidden thing without a good reason. It says in Perek Gidanasha by a kazais of fat, forbidden fats that fell into a pot of meat. Savar Mar Baravashi, Lishiure, Betlasin, Palgaze, Dezesa. Mar Baravashi wanted to measure it with only 30 halves of a kazais because it was only half a measure. And so he says, let's nullify it in 30 instead of 60. Because he says, there's nothing forbidden from the Torah here. So his father says to him, Ravashi, haven't I told you not to make light of rabbinic measurements? Meaning to say, even something that's not forbidden from the Torah, we're not going to change the measurements in the measure of how you're going to nullify it. If so, how much more so we're not going to be lenient over here without a good reason. And I've written this that I've seen people who are women with shields, meaning rabbis that are defending asus muchos liberkaim korshlos, who are trying to defend people and support those who are faltering, who've been eating this kind of cheese and are concerned that it's not permissible. And from their hearts they brought out words to show reasons for their custom. And what do they bring proof from? They bring from the Shach that he says concerning bending down and drinking from the water, even though it has insects, because your intention is only to drink the water. And the other reason is that you can't see these insects. So not only you don't have intention to drink them, so also you can't even see them. And therefore he wants to be lenient in this rabbinical matter. Because it's midrabanan, so we find reasons to be lenient. Bekasha adavar lishmoa chilukim elu lezalzel bisurim drabanan b'dvarim she'en lahem remez b'gemara. And it's difficult to hear these distinctions that are being used to make light of forbidden things from the rabbis with ideas that are not hinted to in the Gemara. But even further, even the time of mishum mius vanino sadas, and since the reason why these things of Baal Tishakter are forbidden is because it's disgusting, and the soul mourns over them. So even though it's only your intention is only to drink the water, or because you can't see them, because you already, even though you know that there's living insects here, you know that you're drinking something disgusting, your soul mourns over it, and you're disgusted internally from this. And eating a food that's mixed in together with poor barf will prove this. That these other liquids, you can't see them. And your intention is not to eat these things. When it's mixed in, we want to know if it's permissible. You don't want to it's not your intention to eat these things. You want to know if you can eat the food that's around it. The Rambam forbids this outright. And this is proof for all these other forbidden, disgusting things. And even if you want to say that this reasoning doesn't apply, wouldn't apply, even if you want to agree to the shach, it wouldn't apply by the cheese. The reasons that he gave don't apply here. The hedja, because it's your intention to eat them. They eat them straight. That you gather them from the people gather them from the tray or from the cheese into their palm, and they throw them in their mouth. They eat them straight, so you both can see them, and it's your intention to eat them. Okay, what else? Vataz. So that's the shach. What about the taz? Taz writes, and here's the point that we're going to get to. This is only applies when can you eat and drink these things? When you drink from the water and so forth, or if they haven't separated from the fruits, and all these different cases. If it's not disgusting to you. Well, but if it's disgusting to you, or there's a concern of danger, the Rambam writes that this is forbidden because of do not degrade yourself. That's the end quote of the Taz. But his words aren't clear. Well, this is what it means. Sover, that he holds that it's only when things are disgusting to you that it's forbidden because of Bal Tishaktu. And this that he says that there's a matter if there's a matter of danger. That is to say, that there's the concern. Maybe you'll swallow a leech, meaning because that's the danger he's referring to. Well, because Vraham and this is what the Rambam says. Oh, in that case, it's forbidden not because of Bal Tishaktu, but because of you have to guard your soul. Now, in our case, it's already well known that Casu Martzu is dangerous. Is a dangerous cheese. People do come in danger from this cheese. I'm not sure if it's dangerous enough, according to the Rambam, to the same degree as a leech. But it is dangerous. But in the assumption in this tshuva is not that there's any kind of danger in that way. Now, this that he writes, that it's not forbidden unless it's disgusting to you, we can say that there's different approaches to this. That there's different perspectives here. That we find that Rav, he was an istinus. By washing the hands. Damar Shmuel, that he didn't want to wash his hands. Instead, he held something with a napkin. And Shmuel said to him, Avdin Kedain, do we do that? He says, I have short mind, I can't handle washing the hands. So here in this case, I am going to hold it with a napkin. So we've established, if that's the case, he's an istinus. Halachas that apply for an istinus apply by him. If so, in the story of Rav Kahana and Rav by the kosher locust, when Rav says take it away because people shouldn't say that I ate it and transgressed Pal Tishartu, it's only to him and to other istanis. Shayu Yodim Boshu istanis. Balashar Inshi. But to other people, in Chashash Isra Bechilus Davarachai, there's nothing forbidden about eating something alive. I mean, but if you want to, that doesn't make sense exactly to say, because once you want to say that, we see that we don't make that kind of distinction. So for example, in the laws of Shabbos, when you take out a chag of chai, a living kosher locust, it's even the smallest amount. Because most people don't care about the locust. If only Rav, who's the istinens, cares about the locust, that means that everybody else doesn't care. And since most people don't care, therefore that's why you're chayav. Because Chazal say in the laws of Shabbos, it only applies by something that applies to most people, not to a smaller amount. Even if somebody wants to take something out and he only takes out a small amount, but he actually needs a bigger amount, and for him, this smaller amount wouldn't be enough. Nonetheless, he's chayav because most people this would be enough for. We don't care about this intention of this person. You only can be stringent about it. Like people who have the intention to set it aside for an example or for medicine, and you're obligated even the smallest amount. So everybody equally is only chayav in its measure. Therefore, that's why you could say the reasoning is that even the smallest amount of a chagav that's alive, you're chayav when you take it out on Shabbos. Because most people, it's not disgusting for them to eat something alive. If so, why in the case of the Mishnah that's mentioned, it brings the story of Rav, and it says, the Mishnah is talking about when you wait for it to die, when it dies. If most people, if it's only the istinus that you worry about, to eat it alive, but after it's dead, it's okay, then it's only the istinus that you need to worry about. And we don't care about the istinus. Most of the people, for the laws of Shabbos, we worry about only the majority of people, and not the few istinus. So you could have said that's the reason. Okay. And so what seems to me proper in conclusion of this matter of the cheese, we can be lenient in this matter. Since we've established that it's not forbidden from the Torah. Therefore, it's proper to give the Torah of each and every person into their own hands. Because the reasoning, as we mentioned from the Taz, is because of that your soul mourns because it's disgusting. If you don't find it disgusting, it's fine. This is similar to what it said in Elutrefos to Amar le Ravina le Ima Ivlali Vani Va'ana Echol, concerning the worms that are in, permissible worms that are in a fish, that haven't separated from the fish. He says, push them inside to a place where I can't see them, and I'll eat them. Put them in such a way that I won't see them and be disgusted. That the implication is that it's simple, that if he would have seen these worms, he would have been disgusted. And therefore, if he would have eaten them, it would have been forbidden because of it being disgusting. So he found a way to eat it without finding it disgusting. Our sages already said that in a case of trying to learn in why kevas nevela can't be used for cheese as rennet, to the stomach of a non-kosher animal can't be used as rennet. And they say, well, we already see that the keva of a korban olah, you can eat it straight. If a Kohen, he says, his daito yafe, if he can handle it, it doesn't find it disgusting, he can eat the stomach straight. So he says, yeah, that's the difference, is that the keva of that keva is permissible, but the keva nevela is not permissible, because somebody who can handle it can eat it. Therefore, you can use it for cheese, but a keva nevela you can't use. However, we're going to make distinctions here. There are things that are very disgusting. That even though there's people who don't find it disgusting, so we're still going to say it doesn't matter. It's still forbidden because of Baltashakts. Like those that drink from the vessel of a workman. And that the Rambam writes all those different examples. So now we can answer the sources in a simple way. That there's things that are alive that are disgusting to eat, and there's things that are alive that are not disgusting to eat. The things that are small, like the worms, the insects in the water, and the maggots in the cheese, we're not concerned because they're small. And then this brisa that you can bend down and drink from the water in the simplest sense, it's permissible. That you can bend down and drink from the water and swallow these insects while they're alive, no problem. But if we're talking about larger creatures, like locusts, there's a concern. And that's that whole story in Perek Rabbi Akiva by Rav and Rav Kahana with the locusts, Shekiv and Shibrias and Gedola. It's because it doesn't matter that Rav was an istinus. This was a large insect, and because they're big, therefore it's disgusting to put them in your mouth and eat them, even if it wasn't Rav. Even though we've gone a little bit too long on this, we've gotten in our hands a number of new laws, and answered, explained the Rambam. There's no time you sit down and learn, and don't learn something new. And that which seems to my knowledge, I have it down.